Hello, folks. Rebecca Adams here, and I have some special people with me tonight. I have Becky Vermeer, whom you know, and we have a special guest with us that Eliza Conley Lapine recommended that she come on and be our guest. So we have Meg with us tonight, which we're really excited to hear her story. We got a little taste of it, excuse me, before we started recording, and we're both really excited to hear what she has to say. So,
Yes,
so Becky, do you have anything on your desk that you want to show us, like a pair of socks?
I do. So I've got a couple of different pair here, but based on the little bit of technical difficulties and such that we had, I think I'm going to share this pair. This pair is one of my favorite pairs. And I don't know if you can see what they say or not, but it's like galaxies in the solar system and it says Space Cadet.
Is that because you're a space cadet? I've never seen
Yes.
you act like a space cadet.
Yes, I'm a self-described space cadet. Tonight
Oh,
anyway. Yeah.
really?
Yeah. So
That's
that's the
news.
socks on display for the evening.
Well, that's news to me. I never would have guessed that you were a space cadet. I would not have.
I mean, we all have tendencies, don't we?
Oh yeah, I
True.
think I'm. I think I'm the queen of the space cadets.
I know I've been called one before.
Have you? Okay, so you understand.
So then it was a good choice of socks for the night then.
That was a really good choice of socks. You pegged me. Yeah.
Or me or Meg. Like I think we're all kind of we're on the same page, it sounds like. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. My dog that I used to have was a space cadet.
Yeah.
He could just sit there and just stare off into space. This one doesn't really. She's ready to attack and guard and whatever she needs to do.
Mine's so old, he goes in the other room and thinks we all left the house
Oh,
and starts barking, and we have to tell him, "Come on, honey, no, we're in here."
oh, poor thing.
I swear, if dogs can have Alzheimer's, mine does. 13.
You know,
Oh,
I've always wondered if they couldn't, if they maybe didn't have that issue as well. Yeah, poor
I mean, I guess it's
thing.
possible.
There's definitely something going on, old age
Oh,
wise,
No.
but he's a cutie.
has he lost his eyesight or his hearing?
We don't know if he's lost his eyesight or if he doesn't let us trim around his eyes anymore, so he has long bangs. We think it's more he has long bangs, and that's why he sometimes doesn't see things. He definitely has his hearing.
Okay, well,
That's
that's
good.
good.
He can hear a bird from 10 miles away.
Wow.
I don't know if literally 10 miles, but I swear it's like
Yeah,
there's a thing with birds.
that's
That's cute.
funny.
So you're gonna show us your earrings tonight?
Sure. You know, this is really funny because I got this shirt out to wear it tonight, and I was like, what is in this pocket? Two pair of earrings. This was one pair. Let me see if I can get it to where you can see it a little better. It's awfully hard to get it in the camera just right. But in between each one of these little, they're like little shells, is a little silver ring. And then these roll up and down. So you can
That's cute.
literally, yeah, move them. I like these. They're different. They're like me, they're unique.
Unique is good.
Yes, it is. Well, Becky, you're the queen of questions. How
Queen of
about you take,
questions.
yes,
That's a fun new title.
that is. I think maybe we should call you that.
I kind of like it.
Maybe you can put on your resume,
I think I should.
Queen of
Ooh,
Queen
you
of
know what?
Questions.
questions.
I
Yeah.
have your resume right here. I'm going to write that down.
You can just mark it in Sharpie.
Uh-huh. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you, if you want me to start off with some questions, my first question is going to be, hi, Meg. What do you got to say for yourself? Just kidding. Actually, though, in all sincerity, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Let's see. Would you like me to start with some background or
Sure.
how? Okay. Well, I grew up, I joke, and my family doesn't always like the joke, but it's true. I was the oops baby. So, yes, I was the youngest of four by quite a bit. My parents had the first three. They decided that, like, I was born at the very beginning of 81. Divorce wasn't a thing, especially in Irish Catholic families.
Mhm.
But, so in 1980, they're getting a divorce. And guess what? They find out they're pregnant with me.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
So
wow.
divorce gets put on hold.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then they end up getting divorced when I was 4 or 5. So in a lot of ways, I grew up in a totally different household than my siblings. I grew up in a one-parent household. They grew up in a two-parent household. They grew up with an alcoholic, father, alcoholic bipolar father in the household. I grew up with a distant alcoholic bipolar father.
Wow.
So in a lot of ways, it was so different, but we all ended up having the repercussions of our upbringing, even though we had, like, I have some friends that think my oldest brother is from like a different marriage, because they don't realize that he's the oldest, I'm the youngest. Growing up, my mother was raising 4 kids, working her ass off, excuse me, bum off from, sun up to sundown, raising kids with um ex-husband who just wasn't that helpful. We would have to go there every other weekend, but we really only saw our grandmother. He lived with our grandmother. And my father was Mr. AA. So he would bring us to all the meetings and we would have to sit in the back and listen to these meetings. And he'd get up and he'd talk about, all these things in his past, but now he's better. And now look at me, and look at this wonderful relationship I have with my family and my children. And we would be told day in and day out how lucky we were to have that man as our father.
Mm.
But nobody realized at home it was the complete opposite. And it was the same with my mother, because my mother worked in healthcare and she had, was very well known, very well respected. We were so lucky to have her as our mother. But it was the complete opposite in the household. And I had one sibling, the one that's closest in age to me. I guess I kind of joke, which again, I use humor to cover things. It might not be the funniest joke, but I joke that she has never forgiven me for being born because she was no longer the baby. So
Yeah.
growing up, I had to deal with an abusive father, an abusive sister, and a mother who was never around and too wrapped up into taking care of everything and doing everything. I mean, we did grow up for, like, the 80s, 90s, middle class. I never wanted for anything, anything that my mother couldn't provide. One set of grandparents did, one or the other. Like, I always went to summer camp and I always had whatever clothes I wanted and everything, but I never had anybody at home. So growing up, I basically raised myself and had a, abusive father, abusive sister, mother that just was an enabler, and it obviously didn't show me good relationships in the future. So, starting even at a young age in high school, I ended up in these abusive relationships. At one point in high school, there was a boy that I just, I declined, and he ended up stalking me and assaulting me. He stalked me for years. And, finally, because of who his father was, because we both came from very, well known families, I was finally able to get a protection order. And I just, I did everything I could to get out of high school early, go off, do what I had to do to just to get away from these people. And unfortunately, bad relationships followed me because I never learned how to have a good one. I had a very abusive marriage to a man who basically thought women were property. He thought he basically had a God complex, thought that, he was a prophet, and just he was addicted to World of Warcraft, but wouldn't let our kids play Minecraft because he thought Minecraft was evil. And we had to show him that all it was kids building things, and had to explain to him. But if you bring up the fact that he was playing World of Warcraft, that's different. It took a very long time for me to break free of him. When I did, I finally got the divorce, and long story short, he found a way to legally kidnap my children. So I had to fight for years to get my children back, and they were at the hands of this man the whole time. In that time, I lost, well, everybody, my family, my friends. I lost my whole support system while battling cancer. So it's like, one thing after another after another. I finally ended up moving out of state. I live in the Portland, Maine area. I moved to the Boston area. So it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour difference. So it was still kind of close, with this amazing man I was dating, a widow, attorney, just raising his two sons. On paper, he was everything you would ever want. 6 months into living with him, I was in intensive care for the first time. I didn't stay much longer. It took me a couple months to make my plan and to get out of there, because after my marriage, I wasn't going to stick around. And I was still trying to, fight for my children, everything else, because I knew that things weren't right in the home, but everybody was saying he's this wonderful Christian man raising these children. I got on a train. I didn't even have any money. I had to leave. I went on Facebook actually, and I just posted something like, "Hey, I'm kind of in a predicament, kind of struggling. Is anybody out there that can help me?" Very, very vague. Somebody reached out. She's like, "Hey, she was in Portland, I was in Boston," and she's like, "What's going on? Is there something I can do from my desk?" Quickly told her what was going on. She bought me a train ticket online. I took the train up. I left everything. I was living in $1 million house in a very nice, like, town. I was making six figures. I just left everything and only took what I could put in my backpack.
Wow.
Not even a big backpack, just like what I would take on as a carry-on. Left everything else, left all of our bank cards, everything, because I could not do this anymore. Got on a train, and I had no place to go when I got that back. When I thought that I was going to be able to, even though I didn't want to, stay with my ex-husband for a short time, but that also meant I could be near my kids. But halfway up, while I was on the train, he told me I couldn't come to his house. It was actually his mother's house, but I couldn't go. So I ended up having a panic attack, was brought to the ER, told them the whole story. They couldn't find a room at a domestic violence shelter. So I went to a crisis stabilization unit until they could find one. I was there for a month and a half, calling every day to the domestic violence shelters. And one woman at the shelter told me that she's like, as soon as we got the opening, I actually said to them, "I know we're supposed to wait for the first person to make a phone call, but this woman's been calling every day. Can we do it?" And they're like, "Yes." I mean, at one point, the crisis stabilization unit was going to send me packing. And a friend of mine, actually my childhood best friend's little cousin, she's an adult now, but she found this out. She's like, called the crisis stabilization unit. And I got, somebody came in and they're like, "There's this woman on the phone who wants to talk to us, but you have to sign the waiver first." So I signed it. She got on the phone and she's like, "You cannot let her go." They were going to give me a tent. And they're like, "You cannot let her go. If she walks out that door, she is going back to him. She's going back down to Boston. She's going to go down to him and she will be dead and it will be on you. And I will make sure that you are sued for negligence because she will die." And, she was right. Where else would I have gone? I had no family, no anything. So I got to the domestic violence shelter. And I was there for quite a while until I finally got into an apartment, and I had absolutely nothing, because whatever I could gather at the domestic violence shelter, and you can't keep much stuff there, and you can't store stuff, whatever's under your bed, because there's no room. And so I just gathered as much as I could. And when I knew I was going to move, I went to Goodwill and I brought everything I could. And it took a while, but that was the first time that apartment was the first time I ever lived on my own. And it's
Oh,
been 7 years. I'm still here. I actually almost moved a couple of times because of the pandemic, everything else. At one point, I like almost bought a house, but then we had mentioned earlier, I owned a business. I closed during the pandemic, so the funding fell through. But I've been on my own for 7 years now, and once I finally got settled here a little bit, I have done everything I can to just make sure that nobody else goes through what I went through. It took a while. My kids, finally, I was able to break them free. They're still like, I've had a protection order on my ex-husband on and off for the last decade. My kids right now both have relationships with their father on their own terms, but at different points in their lives have had protection orders. And, the other person in Boston, I have nothing, know anything. But now that my kids are both over the age of 18, out of high school, I don't have to have anything to do with my ex-husband either. And I don't have really any communication with anybody in my family. And honestly, my mental health has been better than it's ever been in my life. And that's like the quick, I mean, obviously, that's like the quick timeline. There's a million details and stories and everything in between, but that's the quick Reader's Digest snippet.
what condition were your kids in when you got them back? Were they traumatized? Were they what?
So I was able to see them on and off. Um, Basically, what happened was I had full custody. He had parental rights, visitation. When I had to move down to Massachusetts, which was a whole ordeal and traumatic to begin with, I had asked him, can you have the kids stay with you for like 3-4 weeks while I get settled? At the end of that 3-4 weeks, he never let them come back. And like I would have to, like, I end up fighting in family court. He even changed their schools without my permission, which is illegal. Finally, like, the courts were like, you have to at least give her visitation at this point. And there'd be times I'd show up and he wasn't there. The issue with this is during this time, he was telling the kids he was doing it for their own protection. That mom is a prostitute, mom is a drug dealer, mom is a drug addict, mom has psychological issues, mom abandoned you for this man. Not the fact that he wasn't paying child support or spousal support, so I couldn't keep the house up. Not, the fact that he alienated me from any of my support system, cut me off from my family, actually got me disinherited from, everything. But no, it was mom that was bad. And he had told me if I ever left him, he would tell everybody I was crazy. He would make sure I'd never see my kids again. I mean, to this day, my kids are still traumatized in their own ways. They're young adults and they've had a hard time and they've got a lot of trauma, and it's hard, you know. And I try to keep their privacy as much as
Yeah.
possible, but it's been a long road for them.
And how long did you say they lived with your ex-husband?
So within, let me try to think here. So there was 2 years flat that I could barely even see them. And during that 2 years, they're like, you abandoned us 5 years ago. And I'm like, do the timeline. That's not possible. And then when I was finally able to be back here and like really fight everything and take him to court, then they started having to, you know, do visitation because he'd be fined in contempt. And then, so that was about 3.5, 4 years. And then my son had a, brick wall moment with his father. And in the middle of the night just showed up here. And my son's now, my ex-husband's 6'1", my son's like 6'3". My son's very athletic, he's not gonna like, he's always like, oh, dad doesn't, it's like, because you're bigger than him, there's a difference. But then he's like, no, I'm done. So then he came and he lived with me. And then about a year and a half later, his sister finally did the same. And then, so it's been kind of so on and off. But it wasn't until 2020 and we got divorced in 2013, I believe. So it was, and then 2014 or 15 is, I'm trying to do all the math in my head quickly. So 2014, I think, is when I moved down there. And it wasn't until 2020, at the beginning, February of 2020, that both my kids were completely free of him unless they wanted a relationship in any way.
That's a lot of trauma for them.
That is. And obviously there was trauma even before that. And, and I don't know everything that happened in that home, but I know there was neglect. I know there was abuse. I know there was control. So, right now, my youngest is a freshman in college, and my oldest is, finally deciding to go back to school and finish his degree. So that's good. And so I'm proud of them for that. And I just hope that they stick to it.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, since then, it's like my thing is I don't want anybody else to have to go through what I went through. And if I can stop it, I will. And however that means, like I just want to help as many people as I can. I know I can't save the world,
Right.
but at least as many as possible. And that's my goal. Because like during this whole time, I never had an attorney. He had just a pain in the, attorney that like whenever anybody asks me, oh, so who's this attorney? They're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I am so sorry. Like the guy is a lot like my dog. I think he's too old to even like the judge and some other people are like a few times, like he just needs to stop practicing. But even before he got to that point, he was just one of those jerk attorneys that would defend any man on anything. And then the woman is always wrong. Like, at one point he insisted I was this drug addict and that I need to have this expensive hair follicle drug test that I was like, I can't afford it. I'm not going to pay for it. My insurance. Well, why can't your family pay for it? He even said that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? My family's. And so I told him, I'm like, in front of the judge, I don't mind doing it as long as you pay for it. You pay for it, I'll do it. Because I mean, they wanted that whole thing done. And he didn't want to pay for it. So the judge finally was like, then this isn't really an issue. You're just trying to find ways to make her spend money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just the type of person he is. Like, oh, well, we're not going forward until she does a drug test. And the judge is like, she comes in here and like is her own attorney every time and does circles around you. We don't think that she's a heroin addict, like you're saying. Like that's just not how this works.
Right. Wow. Go ahead, Becky. I kind of jumped in and asked some questions, but you're the
Yeah, because
queen
I
of
kind of wanted to
questions.
go back when you said that was the brief overview and there's a million stories and things in between. I'm kind of curious if you could elaborate more on the dynamic of the home life that was going on with what was your mom's relationship like with your dad? What was your dad's relationship like with the other three children? And then as you were born, what did that relationship look like?
So I don't know much about before I was born. from what I do understand, from the little bits I hear from family, from the little bits I hear from siblings, from the little bits I hear from family friends, obviously it wasn't good. My father drank a lot, and he was a teacher, and he, from what I gather, was not the most beloved teacher, and this is from family friends that I know, that were around during the time. I guess he also kept a flask in his desk as a junior high science teacher. He was a nuclear engineer for the Navy before that. And from what I understand, my mother finally was like, "You're done. I can't do this anymore. Goodbye." And he moved about 45 minutes away to my grandmother's house. It was right after my grandfather passed away too, so the timing kind of. But my parents are two people you don't want to be in the same room with. They're miserable together. It's like you dread the holidays because you have to be in the same room. You dread, you know, birthdays, you dread chorus concerts, school plays, science fairs, sporting events, whatever the case may be. My father would only show up if it looked good on him, and then they would be miserable together. And my father just critiques. Nothing is ever, like, both my parents, nothing's ever good enough for them. But he just drills it in and drills it in and drills it in. And they're just, both of them are not the most, pleasant people. My mother is Miss Pollyanna. Everything has to be perfect. Like, oh, everything's perfect. My family's perfect. But like, there's a fire going on around her, like everything's burning on down to the ground. But no, everything's perfect, 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 perfect. I know my siblings all have relationships with both my parents. I'm the only one that I haven't had a relationship with my father for years. My mother more recently, because she just enables everything. My one sister, the one I said that I don't get along with, she literally like will try to sabotage everything I do. She will go out of her way. Like when I had cancer, she told everybody I was faking. Recently, beginning of this year, I had chemo. I have lupus now. And it took a long time to find out that I had lupus. So I had a lot of misdiagnoses. I have a lot of, also, when you have lupus, you have other conditions as well. And it took a long time. And like when I was going through chemo, everything else, and I had, like, 2023 is probably one of the worst years of my life on so many levels, because you finally get to a point that everything's good, and then I had professional and personal and health stuff. And during this, my sister's like, "Oh, she's faking, like she's crazy, da da da," even though I hadn't talked to her or seen her in 3 years. you know that's just the relationship my family has. Everybody is so negative to each other. We don't share anything. Like, my other sister had some really great things happen professionally, where she got worldwide recognition. She didn't even tell anybody in the family. We found out about it on the news, because we just don't trust each other almost, because everything gets so negative. And for some reason, there's like, my brother is the only boy. He's the oldest. He's the golden child. He has a great job where he gets worldwide recognition. My second sister, a totally different field. My brother's in entertainment. My sister's in education. Both of them, though, just kind of stick to themselves, do their thing. But then my other sister loves to just cause the drama, and everybody just kind of feeds into it. So because of that, everybody just listens to her blindly, which I don't know why. Or I shouldn't say everybody. I should say that my other siblings do kind of see through it. When I say everybody, I mean the parents, the aunts and uncles, you know, that the outer, but it's just that really like toxic dynamic. And I tell people a lot of times that, like, I'll have a friend who has a parent that's a narcissist. And I'll be like, I can totally relate to that. I can totally relate to that. And a lot of times when you have a parent that's a narcissist, you have that other parent that's not. They're your saving grace. They're your safe house. They're your beacon of light. But when you have two parents that are narcissists, that are always pitting their children against, like that's what they do, like, pit their children against each other, that competition, that, this one's right, that one's wrong, that you don't get that break. And that's what my life was growing up. It was just chaotic and hectic. And, I just, walking away from it was probably the best thing I ever did. It was one of the hardest to finally walk away from everybody, but it was the best thing I could have done.
So then in your dynamic with your dad being a narcissistic alcoholic, was he a physically abusive person? Was it verbal, emotional abuse? Like what kind of
He's
stuff was going on?
he was abusive in every way possible.
Oh, okay. And
You
to your siblings and your mother as well, or just your mother?
To me, I can speak on my behalf.
Mm-hmm.
I know verbally, mentally, he's abusive to all of us, my siblings, my mother. He was to my grandmother as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have witnessed some physical. I never saw it with my parents because I don't remember my parents married.
Mm-hmm.
They got divorced when I was 4 or 5. I have maybe one or two memories of my father living with us, but they were never with my parents together. So I don't want to speak on that, but I have heard in the past that there were incidences, but I was never witness to it.
Mm-hmm. So then what kind of baggage did your mother bring into the relationship with you as a person trying to raise a child by herself? What did that look like?
I really never saw her. She was working, and she would show up at school things when, suited and made her look good, but she was working most of the time. So by the time I left for school, she'd already gone to work. And by the time I was in junior high school, she was an executive at, administration level at a hospital. So she was gone a lot, and she worked about half an hour, 45 minutes away. So by the time I woke up, she was gone. By the time I would go to bed, she'd be coming home. But when she was home, it was just nothing was ever good enough. Like the house is a mess. This is this is that, this. Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? Why can't you be more like your sibling? And it kind of got to the point where I shut down. And then on the weekends when she was around, it would be like, okay, first of all, I want to be with my friends, but beyond that, maybe like on a Saturday or Sunday, okay, well, let's go out and we'll go shopping and out to lunch. So that was like my relationship with my mother. Either I was being criticized or taken out to shopping and to lunch. There was really no in between.
Yeah. And then your other siblings weren't raised with you at this because they were older than you then at that point.
Right. I mean, they were, but they tapered off. So, I mean, by the time I was a teenager, I was an only child, really, because they were all off on their own. And growing up, I spent my summers with my family in another state altogether, mainly because my mother couldn't really leave me alone with my sister because she was so abusive, even though she won't admit that. But I would go and I would stay with cousins, and I would like be kind of a mother's helper for the summer, and like, take care of my little cousins and things like that, or spend most of the time at my grandmother's house, on the other side of the family. But so like the summer that I would be spending with my mother, I was off living with her family instead until I got to high school. And then by the time I'm in high school, I was off with my friends or working a summer job or being a candy striper.
So then at what age did you yourself start pursuing relationships, like boyfriends and that kind of thing? What age would you consider that you started doing that?
Well, funny enough, I mean, I don't know if you would really count this, but I had my first boyfriend from preschool to about sixth grade, same kid.
So that was pretty serious.
Yes, we were very serious. We did break up once when his family moved away, but they moved back and then
Okay.
we got back together and
Well,
then he
that's
moved
good.
again. So, my grandmother, up to her dying day, she was like 96. She still asked about him. Like way down the street. But besides that, fifth, sixth grade, like end of elementary school, into junior high, middle school, we would always do the spin the bottle and the 7 minutes in heaven. And I was probably a little bit more boy crazy, but I would always focus on always one boy. It wasn't like I wanted a million different boys. And looking back, it's just I wanted security. I wanted to feel like somebody was there. I wanted to feel like I was loved. So I was always the girl that, you know, would be into one guy. And even if I found out he didn't like me, I would just like not be interested in anybody else because I was like so heartbroken over this guy. And, thinking about it now as an adult, I'm probably still somewhat similar. Like I don't date a lot. I'm kind of a serial monogamist. I'll go on a date here and there, one or two dates. And if it just doesn't click, I'll, you know, just move on because I'm not going to waste my time on something. But then if I find somebody I like and it doesn't work out, then I'm just kind of like sad for a year and don't date. So I don't know how healthy that is either. But that's just kind of how it is. I've just never been into wanting tons of different people and wanting the attention of a million different people. It always made me feel gross almost to have a lot of attention on me. So it was always like a one person thing. And when I was younger, I had a little modeling career and I just couldn't do it anymore because I didn't want to be in front of the camera. Like I felt so uncomfortable in front of the camera. I felt so uncomfortable with people looking at me.
Why do you
And
suppose that was?
probably because of, abuse in my childhood. I suffered in high school. I suffered having a stalker who assaulted me. And I had other, assaults in my life. And, I had sexual abuse as a child. So for me, I feel like, you know, they're not seeing me, they're seeing my body and how I look on the outside. And that makes me not want to look, pretty on the outside a lot of times.
Right.
So, in my marriage, I was miserable and I ballooned up. After my divorce, I got skinny again, like almost instantly because I didn't have him near me. And then I gained more weight, but that was because I was sick and going through treatments and stuff. But for the longest time, I just didn't, I would hide from the camera, didn't want anybody looking at me, didn't want the attention on me. And people would ask me because when I was younger, I did act a lot and I would be on stage and people would ask me, like, why don't you audition for another play? We've got this thing coming up, or can you help us? Can you, do some public speaking for us? And I wouldn't do it because I didn't want the attention on me because either I'd have like the look of people, and just feeling their eyes on me, or I would have my sister belittling it and making fun of it and tearing me down and making me feel like I was worthless and why even try. So it took a really long time. I mean, I would even say up until the last couple of years that I finally started reaching out and going past my limits, and starting to share things that I personally do and my own personal achievements because it took me a while to learn this, but in the last year or so, I finally learned that I don't have to pay a tax to live on earth. My existence, I don't have to pay a tax for that. Like, I don't have to be the person sacrificing everything I have, giving everything off my back just so I can feel like I'm worthy to be on this earth. Because look at all the other people who are just grabbing, 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 taking, taking. While I'm giving, they're just sucking it up. It's like the 1%. There's that 1% of, emotional wealth. And that 1%, the only reason that the 99 don't have it is because we're not taking it. Because we already have it inside of us. It's like we just don't open the box and take it. So it's like, I don't think I'm at that 1% yet, because like I said, it's only been a year or two. But maybe I'm up a little bit higher. Maybe I'm at like, within the 70 percentile. I'm still paying my tax here and there, just because I've learned the lesson doesn't mean I've perfected it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, that's the reason I asked you about when you started pursuing relationships or whatever else is, and you hit on it, it was the whole security thing. And so as you got a little bit older, like kind of lead us up to how the relationship with your ex-husband was created and what drew you into that. Was there a feeling of security with him, or what happened there?
I'll tell you what,
wow.
can we go ahead and end this episode? Because we're out of
Sure.
time.
Good, because this was going to be a whole
And that's fine. You take your
a
time.
good
Take
stopping
your
point.
time. Because our whole purpose of doing this YouTube channel is just exactly what you had said. Because I came from a background of abuse, I don't want anybody else to ever have to go through what I went through or what you went through. Becky, seeing it from the other end at the crisis center, she doesn't want anybody to suffer anymore. She wants to work herself into unemployment, is what her
That is
goal
my
is.
goal.
Yeah.
Yep. When I
So
start helping
literally,
people, I tell them my goal is so that you'll never need to call me ever again.
Yeah.
there you go. Exactly. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to close for now on this episode, and we'll pick it up with Becky's question that she had for you for the beginning of the next episode. Becky, can you give us the hand signal for the international signal for help?
So
Oh,
yeah, see somebody with their hand open and they tuck in their thumb and they close their fingers over the top of that and they keep doing that. Oops, my thumb jumped out. That is the universal request for help. I'm being held against my will. I'm somewhere that I don't want to be. I need help getting away from the person that I'm with. And this is the only thing I can do to reach out for help. And so we just want to educate people that if you see someone doing this hand signal, do something. Walk up to them and say, "Are you okay?" If you're not brave enough to do that or comfortable enough giving the scenario, do you need to call the police or do you need to reach out to a person in authority or whatever that is? If someone is doing this, they're saying, "Please help me."
thank you. That's good. We're really glad we learned that. We try to really
Yeah.
promote that.
Oh, by the way, I have an interesting story about that.
Okay.
I was talking to my son. My son is 28. I was talking to him over the Thanksgiving holiday, and I don't know how it came up, but I asked him if he knew what the universal signal for help was. There was a reason, and I can't remember what prompted the conversation, but it was a natural segue into the conversation. And he said, "Sure, I do." I said, "Well, what is it?" And he did this. I said, "Did you learn that from watching our videos?" And he said, "No, actually, I learned that when I was in training for one of the nighttime security jobs that he had done. And he's
Oh,
done nighttime security in a couple of different places, but only one place actually provided that training for him. And I was so impressed with that.
yeah.
So that was part of their training. If you see somebody doing this, and I live in a tourist town where there's all kinds of people all the time, but this one particular resort that he was at said, "Pay attention to that." I know, I was very impressed with that.
No kidding. I keep forgetting to ask my son. Now his boys know what it is, but I keep forgetting to ask him and his
Yeah.
girlfriend, do you know what that is? So, oh,
I
that's
always
awesome.
I
What's that?
also always recommend women to have a keyword that they can, or key phrase that they can text their friends if they're out. For example, with my
Good.
friends, the big joke is if I text one of my friends and I say, "I am at this place, I'm having a PBR, you should come join me." They know there's something wrong because I would never drink a PBR by choice.
Yeah.
It's just, It's a
That's very
very
smart.
rare thing that I will drink a PBR by choice. But if I say I'm at a bar or at, a restaurant or someplace like that,
Yeah.
I say I'm here having a PBR, you should come join me. That means I am telling them where I am,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't feel like I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
I need help.
Yeah, that's
So
very
then they
Like
good.
can either
that.
call the restaurant, they can call the police, they can do what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's
That's
Oh,
very
something I
good.
always recommend.
Yeah, that's
that,
excellent safety planning. Excellent safety planning.
yes, it is. I love that.
And that's been a standing thing for like almost 20 years, that one phrase.
I
So,
love
my
it.
other friends, they have different ones. Everybody has a different phrase. That's like their
Mm-hmm.
red flag. You're on a first
Yeah.
date, you text that, or whatever the case may be, I need
Mm-hmm.
help.
Yeah,
Oh, I
very
love
good.
that.
Very
Mm,
good.
it is. Well, folks, we're learning a lot, and we're going to learn a whole lot more from Meg, I'm sure. So please join us for our next episode. Excuse me, the asthma. Uh, remember that no matter where you are in this process, you're always free to soar.